Okay. So.
Thank you for the welcome words. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened something like 450 years ago? There was a famous Renaissance architect. His name was Philibert de Lombre, French architect, and he was famous for his civil engineering skills and for his construction skills. And he developed the so-called reverse ship hull. He developed this construction. No, it's not 400 years old, but he developed the theory of this construction. All these arched trusses you see here, all these bindings, these boat bindings, this goes back to kind of 500 years of engineering excellence. Why do I say this? Why is it part of one of our most famous event halls we have in Austria? Something like 400 years later, I am now at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century. Austria was still one of the marine international nations. And of course, TU Wien, at that time it was called the Imperial and, as a K&K Institute, Polytechnic Institute. We had an institute of marine ship construction. And that was one of the reasons why this building, which was built in 1850, but then was kind of refurbished again and again, and at the end of the 90s, beginning of the 20th century, we got this really marvelous walled ceiling. Why do I mention this? Things are changing. What we have been excellent 100 and 200 years ago is not relevant anymore. But what we are talking today started as a relevant institute 30 years ago. In 1988, the first Institute of Database Systems and Artificial Intelligence was installed at that time at the kind of Department of Computer Science of TU Wien. And since then, since the last 30 years, passing all winters of AI and summers of AI, all highs and ups and downs, the group which developed artificial intelligence techniques, being it data intensive, being it rule-based, have kind of devoted all their brain, all their intelligence to build up one of the most famous groups in artificial intelligence in the world. Why do I mention this? This is not enough. It's not enough to talk about technology. We as a scientists, especially in the engineering science, we also have the responsibility to talk about the impact of our tools, the impact of our technology. And this brings me to today. This brings me to 2022. A couple of weeks ago, and it was just a couple of days before the artificial, what's called, Service Act was passed, the Digital Service Act, thank you very much, was passed. So the interesting part, if a machine would also now, but I guess a machine would also make this remark, was passed by the EU just a couple of days before. Barack Obama got an invitation to the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute at the Stanford University. And he was talking about surveillance, capitalism, he was talking about the right of having your own data, about data sovereignty. And he mentioned, apparently, the EU being kind of ahead of the United States, especially in the area of responsible development, transparency, and kind of taking responsibility for the things we are doing. And it is my really great pleasure that we have today, in the middle of the pandemic or after the pandemic, we all don't know, the first really internationally renowned panel discussion on one of the most important topics of our days. We are talking about how democratic values will kind of co-develop with our technology. And I'm very pleased that you are all here in this room and out there in the space. And thank you for the panelists already now that you joined us for this event. And thank you for the introduction.
Okay, so thank you for all who don't know her. This is our Dean, Gerti Kappel. Thank you for this wonderful opening. For the opening of a bit of a turbulent event, as you probably realized. But let's go step by step. I will show you anyway the agenda that we have. So we had the opening by our Dean. And we are happy to have not only our Dean, but we have more or less the complete Dean's team here present, showing how important our faculty is considering this event or this topic as a whole. So present means either present here or present in the internet, but with one very valid exception. All of the Dean's team confirmed that they will participate today. I'm also very happy that we have Magister Murhammer and Magister Hegni from our ministry. Now I have to read that. It's a bit of a long name. From our Federal Ministry of Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology here. They told me they are specialized, or their duty is in artificial intelligence there. And so thanks for being here with us. We consider this as an acknowledging that TU Wien is doing good things on the one side. Yeah, thank you. And we also acknowledge this as a confirmation that this topic is important for society. And yeah, and this brings me actually to the next points in our agenda. Before we really start with our panel, I want to let you know that afterwards, after the panel discussion, we have space we have a small buffet where you can also get together and talk about your impressions and about your feelings about this topic, kind of off records afterwards. And I would really invite you to stay a bit and exchange your thoughts with us. I think the topic deserves it. But of course, for the main panel, we would start now. And there is a small change, so I'm actually very, very excited that we have a brilliant panel. We have Marc Rotenberg, who is currently here as a guest professor for our PhD students. And we took this as an occasion to put together this panel, and the plan was to have Professor Wendehorst also join the panel, and Max Schrems was also invited and confirmed, but we just heard that he had an emergency in his office and so he cannot come. But it wouldn't be TU Wien if we couldn't handle exceptions. And so we have invited our former Dean Hannes Wertner, and probably most of you know him anyway for his activities about digital humanism. He will jump in and complete the panel with a different viewpoint, of course. He's not a lawyer, he's a technician. So let's see how this works out. And we also have a professional moderator to whom I will hand over in a minute. We have Josef Broukal, whom most of you know as an anchorman from the news in TV. But beyond that, he is also a very recognized journalist, and he also received the Austrian State Prize for Journalistic Achievements, to just say one thing about him. And so I would like to hand over to you and leave the floor to the panel.
Thank you, Professor Steininger. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of the young people here in this room don't know me. The last ones that knew me were those 3 or 4 years older than you who said, as a child I had to look with my parents Zeit im Bild. Yeah? I anchored Zeit im Bild for about 3 decades, but I'm 76 years now and I'm a pensioner as a journalist. But as a journalist, you're never a pensioner as long as you are free from Alzheimer's, which fortunately I'm still are. So please, Professor Rotenberg, Professor Wendehorst, Professor Wertner, please come to the podium. So, we thought we would discuss our topic along a few phrases or questions. And the first one is by Professor Rotenberg. He knows it quite well. Neural networks are essentially black boxes. All you can get is an explanation of the outcome, but not the proof. In a computer program 20 or 30 years ago, you just went through all the ifs and then and while, and you knew what the program would do. And you could really say in advance what it will do, but not so with most of the AI programs we have today. This is all very secret, and even the people who programmed the AI programs don't know for sure what it's doing. Do you remember the Go session with DeepMind, yeah, DeepMind, and the people from DeepMind said, well, he won, but we didn't know, we don't know why. Okay, so that's funny if it's Go, or that's funny if it's a social game, but it's not funny if politics is involved, and political decisions are made by programs whose inner workings no one understands. So, Professor Rotenberg, why is this a danger to society?
First of all, let me begin by thanking everyone for your kind invitation to be here. And let me also ask my students, have you completed your assignments? You were brilliant because you were both here and preparing your very good work. So before I became a lawyer, because we have very few lawyers in the United States, and I felt a need to address that challenge. Before I became a lawyer, I actually wrote computer game programs. I wrote chess and backgammon programs. And they were pretty good. And they are what we would describe today as rule-based expert systems. We would create a decision tree. We had some techniques for optimizing our search. We had some evaluation algorithms. And if our knight sat over on the side of the board for too long, we could make some adjustments and have better outcomes. And the old style AI, in fact, in the expert system world, reflected expertise because people much better than me, chess grandmasters, would come along and say, this is the better way to write the evaluation algorithm. And the machines got smarter and smarter. But here's the key point. We understood them. We could examine the code. We could look at the decision tree. We could make adjustments. It was all very transparent. So a little bit like Rip Van Winkle, I go to sleep, which is to say I went to law school. I became a lawyer. I became very interested in law and public policy and legislation and privacy and computer security and all these other things. And then I came back to the world of computers and algorithms. I woke up in the era of machine learning. And I asked myself, what is going on? There was a famous match just a few years ago. You speak of DeepMind. It was actually, I think, Stockfish and AlphaZero. Stockfish, very famous computer chess program. World champion, in fact. But it was a traditional program, rule-based expert system, some brute force table lookup. It played against AlphaZero, designed by Google, which had no interest in the expertise of grandmasters. It said simply, tell me the rules of this game, give me a couple hours to play 4 million games. Okay, I've got it now. And AlphaZero beat Stockfish. And I remember, you should find this article, by the way. It's a very interesting article by Garry Kasparov, the former world chess champion, in Science magazine in 2018. And he writes, this is amazing, but I actually don't understand what happened. I just don't understand. Why did it make that move? And I can't even look at the code. I can't even replicate the results. I'm not even certain that if the program were given that same opportunity again in the same position, it might not even find a better move. Because now, in fact, it has more data and more experience, and maybe there was a move it missed originally. And I'm sharing with you this story because on the one hand, I'm fascinated by this, absolutely fascinated. And at the same time, I'm deeply concerned that we are going to turn over decision-making about people, about employment, about criminal sentencing, about education, about recommendation techniques on the internet, to systems that we won't understand. And we will, by the way, be very impressed with the results. Just as AlphaZero beat Stockfish, which we have to acknowledge, we will say, wow, this is tremendous what these programs are doing. But the fact that we don't fully understand them, that we can't prove results, and that we can't replicate results, to me, is actually the greatest challenge we face today. So I'll stop there.
Okay. So we don't have government by the people, we have government by the algorithms. Is it what you're... Yeah, Professor Wendehorst.
Well, thank you so much.
Black boxes that explain themselves not to us anymore.
Yeah, so first of all, let me start by thanking you for the kind invitation. And it's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here at the Faculty for Informatics, because I always have the feeling this is where real science is happening. You know, as a lawyer, you kind of react to what's happening out there. And you have the feeling that this is where things are being developed, where things are moving forward. And so I'm primarily full of admiration for everything that's being developed, and I'm so full of admiration and happy also to see what's possible at the moment. And then my colleagues from informatics department at our university or other places, they come to me and they describe the success they have. And they describe also the great successes they have with artificial intelligence and neural networks. And so at first sight, this is great. And then, of course, you start thinking and you start discussing with them, you know, what if as Marc just said, I mean, if it's not just in a technical setting, if it's suddenly about people. And if it's suddenly about people, you start thinking as a lawyer, now, what will all this do to the nice ethics guidelines, to the nice rules we have been developing over the decades? What about the individual rights of people to get an explanation, to challenge a decision, to get a new decision, to have a decision reconsidered? And so it makes you, you know, thinking what will happen, what will this do to our society really? And you start thinking about how to basically design new rules also as a lawyer for the new digital age, and whether we need some rules, something like a right to receive an explanation. But having said that, maybe if I may just add one further thought. We normally discuss AI and the black box effect and so on only with that negative, that critical undertone. So like, what will AI be doing to our society? It's all terrible. We need to define red lines. We need to have some limits. And that's certainly correct. But I think this debate about AI is really so important because it makes us think for the first time, how does human decision-making work? And don't let's be naive. I mean, human decision-making is full of bias, is full of prejudice. It's really bad things are happening in recruitment, in whatever, where humans make decisions. And so this is why I really like this debate now, because it makes us consider and reflect for the first time really how are we making our decisions. And I think this is really an opportunity for us to also make better decisions as humans.
Professor Wertner?
I think the first try was to replace Marc Schrems with an AI. So there was not sufficient AI available, so the second choice was me. I thank you for this invitation to join the panel here.
He invited himself, yeah.
No.
But we are happy with his decision.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to have this discussion here because it shows a transformation of computer science, because what you exactly said. We are discussing now at, let's say, at the core of computer science in Austria. 2 lawyers of high international standard are discussing about computer science and the impact, and it shows that the role of computer science already. And this is somehow, it's a transformation of the society, but also of the discipline of computer science, which is important for us, which is very important. And we understand that we do a lot of good things for the world, but we do also create quite an harm. And for, let's say, avoiding or, let's say, having answers to that harm, we need other disciplines. And we cannot do it alone. And I think this panel is somehow an example or a demonstration how this could be approached. Going back to the question of Marc, and I think it's even worse. No, because let's say, yeah, you are scared, but it's even worse. Because neural networks, you can somehow understand the result, but you cannot explain how the decision was made. And now I have a conjecture where I say, okay, take an expert system, taking all the possible reasons for finding these solutions. This computer program will find an explanation for this solution found by a neural network. And this might be even better explanation than a human could do. So you have a system where you do not really understand how the decision was made, but you have a second system observing the first system and creating a causal network of arguments with some credibility. And even this is somehow a fiction, it's a virtual thing, okay? This brings me back to the argument which Christine already, so it's worse it's even worse, okay?
Thank you for raising my spirits.
No, we had lunch together yesterday with Edward Lee, and then Marc left because of this. No, it's okay.
It wasn't that bad.
No, and what Christiane said is very important. It uncovers the bias we have in our human decision making. Because look at the harm we are doing to the world without technology. And I would be happy if these decisions wouldn't be made. And I would have some support to make better decisions. Okay? So human decisions are very fast. I don't know who of you knows the work of Kahneman, of fast and slow thinking, that we have very fast decision making, which are somehow by emotional framing, which we cannot explain why we do this answer. So this is something, and then afterwards the human creates a rational argument for the decision made previously without having this.
Yeah, that's what political debate is about, yeah.
So it's somehow, I think it's bad and good, and it's worthwhile a deeper discussion and reflection on ourselves. And I think it's something where I need a cooperation between the use of technical tools and what's the role of human, which should be central. Here I agree, but we should not ignore the power of this algorithm.
Yeah, so there are applications which are harmless. A program better than a human chess player, so fine, yeah? A program better than the world's best Go player, even finer, yeah? But then you have a program in criminal sentencing. You have a program in Austria at the Arbeitsmarktservice that says you don't get a job offer. It's senseless with you. Yeah? And by the way, it's mostly women that don't get job offers by this program. Yeah? Job offers by this program. So in the moment that decisions really concern people, yeah? The fun is over, I think. Yeah? The fun is, hey, go, chess, whatever. Yeah? Eliza, yeah? Okay, so this brings me to my second slide. And now this is the next question. Is it possible to establish effective red lines for controversial practices such as, and these are the examples by Professor Rotenberg, social scoring, facial surveillance, and predictive policing. Things that in the United States are quite state-of-the-art and used in many cities already. Oh?
Right, we call that innovation.
So, you call it innovation. So, but the question is, are there effective red lines? What's forbidden? What should never be allowed to happen?
Well, I'm smiling looking at my students because we spent the week actually talking about this and talking about how organizations such as the OECD and UNESCO and the European Commission and the Council of Europe are all struggling with this issue. And the point that I've tried to make this week is that it's wonderful to talk in an aspirational sense about what AI might accomplish and how we can perfect our technique and how we can make adjustments as we learn more. But the hard problems turn out to be whether we can create political institutions that simply say, no, this particular technique we have concluded, perhaps as a democratic society, or as a society that values human rights, or as a society that's concerned about gender equity, this particular technique we're not going to permit. And it turns out to be, in fact, a very difficult political problem because our sense, I think, about technology and about innovation is almost instinctively we can always make it better. I mean, you know, it's like, tell me what your objection is. Tell me the problem you've identified. Very good, I understand. You know, we're going to fix that. But at some point, you have to answer the question. You know, you have cameras in public places. And it's actually not too difficult now with smart technology to do real-time identification. So now you know the actual identity of people in public places. And you can actually link their actual identity to databases. And you might even find some criminals in public places. So now you have your good outcome with AI. And today we were talking about emotion recognition. So you might observe the image and determine that this person looks quite angry and upset, and maybe we need to look at them more closely. And you go down this road of really brilliant technologies. And by the way, you're now in a couple of cities in China, because China is fascinated by the opportunities. And these are efficient, these are attractive. I don't mean to say, by the way, only China. You can see these techniques being deployed in many cities around the world. So to me, you know, one of the fascinating issues, and I think it is ultimately a political issue, is how are we going to manage these most controversial applications?
Would one way be to always have human decisions following machine decisions, so that the decision of an AI machine will never have the last word?
Right, so we talk a lot about, I'm sorry, just to say quickly, we talk a lot about human in the loop, but you sit with a judge and she says, you know, yes, I may have the final decision, but next to me is this highly regarded expert system with lots of evidence in support of its justification, maybe from GPT-3. It may actually be nonsense, but it may read very well as a justification. What am I to do? Am I supposed to second guess this machine that has the world's knowledge about whether it's the right outcome?
Yeah. Professor Wendehorst?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Redlines?
I agree with everything Marc said. The red lines are a difficult question, in fact, and I've been arguing for what I call the unfair algorithmic practices approach or unfair data practices approach for quite a long time. And then the first step was I co-chaired the Data Ethics Commission advising the German government, and we developed that criticality pyramid or risk pyramid. You may have seen that. And the idea of that risk pyramid was that, you know, at the bottom you have a baseline of algorithmic systems that are not really problematic, and then come the more problematic ones. And at the top of the pyramid there was a red zone of algorithmic systems we definitely don't want, and we definitely have to ban. It was incredibly difficult to agree within the Data Ethics Commission on what those red zone algorithmic systems should be. When I read our report, I'm still a little bit dissatisfied, I have to say, because we only said, you know, well, maybe autonomous weapons and so on. So we were a little bit vague. Then came the Artificial Intelligence Act, and of course we took part in the public consultation and so on and so forth. And again, I put forward again my idea of the unfair algorithmic practices and the red lines and so on. And then, of course, I was prompted to say, well, can you deliver a draft? You know, I mean, how to formulate the stuff. And of course, then the really difficult part of the story began, because it's so difficult to define exactly what you believe is a red line and what should be forbidden. So, of course, you can say manipulation, exploitation, discrimination, stigmatization, and humiliation, and so on. So you can kind of describe what you don't want in a very abstract manner, but to kind of bring that into a form that can actually, you know, be applied by courts and that can work in practice is quite challenging. Well, I did deliver some sort of drafts. At the end of the day, as you may know, the Artificial Intelligence Act did come forward, or let's say the proposal did come forward with a list in Article 5, a list which is quite narrowly formulated, much more narrow than any of my own drafts had been. So I was a little bit critical of that very narrow approach, but it's a starting point. I mean, you start defining what shouldn't be done. And we have other areas, and sorry for kind of bringing some legalese now into the discussion. I will try not to, but there are areas where the law has shown that this unfair something approach can work. And one example is contract law. You will probably conclude lots of contracts with lots of small print in there every day, and you just don't take the time to read the small print, you just sign. And that's just rational, and that's what you should do, actually, because there's law to protect you, because if anything that small print is unfair, it will simply be invalid. So just sign what is there, and then if it's unfair, it will be invalid. And I think we need to reach a similar situation also with data practices with AI. Now, I realize it's a little bit more difficult on the enforcement side, and this is really the crucial point, how to enforce this stuff. But I think we need to have the same situation with data and with algorithmic systems, because I don't want to accept that I'm protected as a consumer when we have a transaction of 99 cents, but I'm not protected when it's about my fundamental rights.
Yeah, so I'm a journalist. I'm always looking for the short headline. So what was the one phrase that you would tell
yes,
your,
we need red lines. We need red lines. We must make them enforceable, and this is the big challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let me ask Professor Rotenberg and you, is this also, are there different ways to look at it in the parties, Republicans and Democrats, social democrats in Europe, liberals and conservatives? Are the conservatives rather, let's go, let's do it, and the liberals and social democrats applying all the brakes they have at their disposal, or is it a non-bipartisan question?
Well, let me say on the U.S. side, I'm actually a very big believer in nonpartisan policy solutions. I mean, we all have our personal viewpoints, but I've spent much of my career trying to bring people together and say we really have a common purpose in trying to establish good policy frameworks for data protection and for AI policy. And of course, our banner right now is democratic values, small d democratic, democratic society values. I wrote an article just a couple of months ago when the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the United States, Dr. Landro Nelson, called for an AI Bill of Rights. And I wrote, I think this is an excellent proposal. Let me give you, if I may, a little advice. My students are going to smile, they've heard this. Keep your statements simple and clear, not too many qualifications. Be serious about implementation, so we don't simply have words, but we think about its application. And do this on a nonpartisan basis, because opposing discrimination and bias in algorithms is something we should all agree to. So that is, truly my philosophy. Now, of course, different political groups have different starting points in terms of whether they want a lot of regulation, a little bit of regulation. Property is very important, property is not so important. We can respect all of that, and we can still say, let's see, let's see if we can find some common ground. This week, in fact, we learned that Dr. Nelson is planning to release her Bill of Rights in the next week or two. And we sent her another note, and we said, by the way, here's a reminder of what we said before, and we're optimistic that your Bill of Rights will go forward on this basis, nonpartisan.
Okay. And in Germany is?
Well, it's a difficult question. In general, I would agree with your analysis. So there's a certain tendency that it's the way you describe. But for example, take the Data Ethics Commission. So we had the whole political spectrum. At the end of the day, we came up with a unanimous report and a unanimous decision. So it is possible to reach consensus. But there is, of course, a certain tendency, and there are many people out there that say, that hate the R word. So the R word is regulation, and everybody agrees normally when it's about ethics. So that we need AI ethics, everybody's happy with that. But the question is then, do we need regulation? And the R word is where normally people start to disagree.
Yeah. So. Could it be
I could add one remark to that. No, sorry, because you said something on this political party level. And I think it's not a distinction between left and right. I think it's an issue of power. Who is in power? And if you look very seriously also at the Austrian situation, when the Social Democrats had the Ministry of Internal Affairs, they were not very critical or were not very looking a lot at privacy issues. It changed when they were in opposition. And it's also the other way around. And you could also take in the US, if I look at Snowden, there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats in the US to treat Snowden differently. Both are happy that he's in Russia. So I think it's a power issue, and it's not so much, let's say, a political, ideological argument. There are differences, but when they are in power, I think it very fast is shifting.
Okay. So probably there will not be a single red line, but a number of red lines, one for each topic. Or, might that be? But is there I'm thinking, don't do evil. That would be the shortest line. But it's, okay, don't do evil. So what is evil? Yeah.
But actually, let me repeat. I mean, we've seen this in many areas of our life. Contract was just one example. There's also commercial practices, and we have the same vagueness, we have the same problems, and it's just that we've got used to that for some centuries, and we know how to deal with it. And AI and data looks also new and so different, and so we believe it's so difficult to cope with it, or probably we just need some years or maybe decades to learn how to cope with it. So I'm a little bit optimistic there, I have to say.
Yeah. So, but we have seen ways in Europe especially to rein in those American companies. We have the GDPR, you know what it means? Yes, okay, and we will have probably the Digital Services Act, which is now a proposal by the Commission, which still has to be evaluated by the member states and the European Parliament. So, which countries or international organizations have had the most success so far with the regulation of AI? Professor Rotenberg. Are there any who've had success?
you know, it was very interesting when we put together our big survey. We looked at 50 countries, and we established a methodology to rate countries' AI policies and practices. And I think at the top, I hope I don't make a mistake here, but I think Korea, Italy, Canada, and Germany had 11 out of 12. Austria, by the way, was in 5th place. I recognized today.
It had 9 out of 12.
Yeah, it was up near the top. But the obvious question you need to answer when you ask this is, well, what do you mean by success? I mean, if we were to talk about the number of papers published, you know, we look at U.S. and China, let's say, or if we look at investment dollars, again, U.S. and China. So the typical measures of academic success in terms of budgets and papers, it's fairly clear who the AI superpowers are. But if we're looking through a political lens and we ask questions like, well, who has actually passed some laws to protect fundamental rights? Or who has given the public the opportunity to comment on the national AI strategy? Or who is thinking about independent methods to evaluate if AI systems work as they're supposed to work? Those were the questions we were interested in. And so as I said, it was really quite remarkable to see these 4 countries in 4 different regions, by the way. So Canada, North America, Germany, Italy in Europe, and Korea in Asia. So the other quick point to make here, which we're also talking about in class, is how, as international organizations have learned more about the challenges of AI, the standards and the norms have become higher and more precise. And we would anticipate that, actually, because typically as a policy domain matures, the policymakers stop giving the simple speeches that say on the one hand, on the other hand, but everything will work out great. They really get into the detail, and they say, well, maybe we need to do this, and maybe we need to do this. And that's the difference, for example, between the OECD AI principles, very nice starting point, everything will work out great, and the EU AI Act, which actually tries to get into the details of the challenges.
Well, I read that paper of yours, and I saw that Austria had place 5. It was in the second best group, but 3 of the 12 questions you asked in this paper were not answered in the case of Austria. So I telephoned the Ministry of Energy Change, whatever it is called now, and I asked them, what about those 3 points? They promised an answer, but maybe we'll get the answer now. There are 2 persons here from that ministry, and maybe one of them has seen my mail. I posted it 14 days ago and was promised an answer in short time. But anyway, place 5 is fine for a small country like Austria.
Very impressive.
5 out of 50. Well, that's something, yeah. So, okay, what lessons should we learn from the GDPR, the European rules, for the development of the UEAI Act this would probably be something you would be at home with. So we have GDPR now for some time. Dr. Schrems could tell long stories about good in principle, bad in practice. But has GDPR proven something that's worth being also used in the Digital Service Act coming?
Well, it's a pity Max is not here. He'd really give a lecture on that. But anyway, I think the GDPR is great. I mean, the GDPR has been, it's called the gold standard of data protection. It's probably been the most influential piece of EU legislation we've seen. I still remember the day when it went into effect in 2018, and all the US papers were titling
End of the Internet.
End of the Internet, and also, Europe as a regulatory superpower. I was not so sure whether that is a good thing and a compliment, or whether I should rather be a little bit, whether I should think twice about whether I want to be a regulatory superpower. Anyway, the Brussels effect is something we're talking about all the time. But when I look at the effect which the GDPR has had, I think there are some lessons to be learned what the EU AI Act should do differently. And one important point is certainly that the AI Act should take a more risk-based approach. And it is taking a more risk-based approach. I don't believe that will change. So the GDPR applies across the board. The notion of personal data is extremely broad. There are people who say there's basically no non-personal data around. So it covers the bulk of data available worldwide. The notion of processing is extremely broad. You know, it basically includes anything you do with data, including mere storage, using data, or reading data, whatever. This is all processing. And there are only very few exceptions, like there is a household exception. What I do privately in my diary is not covered by the GDPR, but when I publish it on Facebook, it is again covered by the GDPR. So it's extremely broad, and it covers basically any kind of human activity without looking at the level of risk posed by that activity. And that is, of course, something that is problematic for many activities. And it doesn't necessarily, at the end of the day, raise the level of protection you actually have, because people tend to just ignore it, because any kind of human activity is covered by the GDPR. So for whatever you're doing, when I'm standing here, when I'm, calling somebody's name or citing somebody, I should reflect, do I have a legal basis on the GDPR? That's totally crazy. So
I'm spending hours a day answering cookie questions.
So I think the AI should take a risk-based approach. It should only target the risky activities and shouldn't, cover any kind of computer program like you have in a drinks machine or whatever. So that's one lesson we should learn, and I'll be quick. So the next one is, I think, flexibility. We see the GDPR is basically like carved in stone. We all know there is a need to adapt it, but nobody's going to adapt it. Nobody's going to touch it even. So that's certainly a problem. And the third one I already mentioned, that's substantive limits. We need substantive limits. We don't need just procedural rules and still more red tape and procedure and documentation and so on. That's fine. But we need substantive rules, what you may do and what you may not do. And you may not cause certain harm for people.
There you are. Don't cause harm. Yeah.
Well, since Max is not here, I feel the need a little bit to play Max for just a moment. I hope he excuses me when he sees this very bad impersonation. But I know Max would say that he's extremely frustrated about the implementation of the GDPR. And he will tell you that it, on paper, it establishes all of these very important rights. And he will also tell you these rights are very important. And then he'll tell you about the hundreds of cases that his organization, NOYB, None of Your Business, hundreds of complaints they brought to data protection agencies across the EU, and all the frustration that he's had, particularly on this matter of enforcement and coordination among the various supervisory authorities. So I suspect that one of the lessons of the GDPR is that people will think a little bit more carefully. Do we centralize that authority within the Commission? Do we leave it to the member states? Do we create some coordinating mechanisms? Because frankly, there have been problems with the GDPR. Now, even as he's complaining, let me just acknowledge the fact that what Max has managed to do in the realm of data protection law is truly remarkable. Because one of the key goals of the GDPR is to ensure that the data of Europeans when it's transferred to third-party countries, which receives, adequate or essentially equivalent protection. And I just want to say this is a very familiar concept in the world of regulation. All countries, when they're importing foods and drugs and consumer goods, want to make sure that these goods and medicines and foods are safe for their consumers. So I'm not at all an American who says, what business does Europe have trying to protect the data of Europeans? It seems to me quite natural, in fact. But here's my key point about Max, and just by way of recognition for his, truly heroic work, he has twice challenged the legal bases that were established by the European Council to enable the flow of the personal data of Europeans to the United States under, frankly, I say as a lawyer, very weak legal protections. And he goes to the Court of Justice and says this is not going to fulfill the purpose of the GDPR or the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It has to be struck down. And he's successfully won that argument twice. I know of nothing else like this, in the history of law where a single person has gone to the top court.
2 times, twice.
Twice. And now he's like on to his third, because we have a new, if I may say, poorly drafted legal arrangement called the EU-US Data Privacy Framework, which looks very much like the last poorly drafted legal arrangement. And we're already, putting together our buttons and stickers for Schrems 3, which will be the next case. So, Max is rightly frustrated about the implementation of the GDPR, but also to his credit has had enormous success establishing a strong grounding for the GDPR.
As far as I can see as a journalist, it's the Irish Data Commission that blocks everything. This is not the data protection, but the Data Allowance Commission. It has, it takes 4 years to get an answer from them. Yeah, they want an enormous amount of money in way of fees, yeah? So Schrems had crowdfunding. This was the only way he could put his remarks to the Irish Data Protection Commission, which protects not the data, but the companies who violate the GDPR. Yeah? So, but the new Digital Services Act, I don't know, Professor Rotenberg, did you see the proposal of the European Commission on it? Yeah. Because in Article 62, So the first time, very large platforms should ensure that recipients are appropriately informed and can influence the information presented to them. So the first time, if I go Facebook, Twitter, whatever, it has to tell me what it does with my data, what it sees from my person, how it acts on what I give as input. And then there is, in order to appropriately supervise the compliance of very large online platforms with the obligations laid down by this regulation, and now the important part of the phrase, the Digital Service Coordinator or the European Commission may require access to or reporting of specific data. So the European Commission wants to reserve itself the right to look into Facebook, Twitter's, and Google's code, and YouTube's code, and see what's happening with the data I give, and how am I served by them. Is this new, or is this also something that will not work in practice?
Sorry. No, I just want to say, they can uncover the machine learning code. The deep neural network code. It doesn't tell you anything. It's a neural network with 25, 27, 28 layers. You know very well how it works, but you need the dynamics, you need the data, you need the classification info. The code itself doesn't tell you anything. This is something you can use it. It's important what is behind it, what are the training data, what are the real data, and I doubt that this will be uncovered because this is really the essence they have. So this is something, in this new AI with machine learning, with deep neural networks, you can have the code. The issue is the training data.
Yeah. Well, this is a very long paragraph. I didn't read all of it because we would be out of time. But I think they've reserved a number of things that they want to have from these companies in order to look into their code and test it. I don't think that they stopped at the data, but it's a long paragraph. So will the Digital Services Act help to control AI? That was the question, Professor Wendehorst.
Well, the Digital Services Act does, of course, not primarily just focus on AI, but it includes a lot of rules that are relevant for the use of AI in a particular field. So I think the Digital Services Act will be a huge step forward. It just successfully passed negotiations, and we're going to see the consolidated final text hopefully very, very soon on. And can have all the rules in their proper numbering and in their final form. So what I like in particular about the Digital Services Act is that it has different rules for different sizes of companies. So it's no longer a one-size-fits-all solution, but the really very big online platforms, the so-called VLOPs, so VLOPs, they face much stricter rules and much stricter regulations than just the large ones, and then there are exceptions for small and micro enterprises. And I think that is a really important thing. I also like the focus on systemic risks, so I like a lot about the Digital Services Act, also the data access right for vetted researchers and so on. So I think there's a lot of good elements in there. And it's particularly the focus on systemic risks, which I would like to see in the AI Act. And I suggested also to basically copy-paste what we see in the Digital Services Act about systemic risks for the really big players into the AI Act. Because also for AI, it makes a huge difference. Take recruitment software, whether you have just one small company using their self-built recruitment software tool. Okay, if that's biased, it's bad, but yeah, so there could also be a biased recruitment officer. But things change when you have recruitment software that has 50%, 80% market coverage, or maybe hidden 80% market coverage, because theoretically it's different types of software, but they're all based on one and the same, basic model. So, and I think there you would need an additional mechanism to take care of those systemic risks. And I would like to see that in the AI Act, actually.
Mm-hmm. Are you part of the process in one or the other of your many hats?
We are all part of the process,
okay,
we reply to public consultations.
Good, but the DSA, the Digital Services Act, is a step in the right direction, but it's not the end, because things change and nothing is forever, yeah.
It's interesting to note, by the way, about Article 62, which concerns recommendation algorithms, that China actually passed a regulation on recommendation algorithms that looks very much like Article 62, with the same ability to inspect the algorithm and to make transparent. But it also does so with the objective of ensuring support for the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
So to determine whether it is, an approved recommendation algorithm, you align it with a certain political standard. And I mentioned this week in our class, we were talking about Elon Musk, who he buys lots of things. Mars, has he bought Mars yet? I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so he buys Twitter, but one of his comments about Twitter is that he wants to make the algorithm transparent. And almost immediately there was a response, as you suggested. This turns out to be a much harder problem than you might imagine, but it sounds very good. And you should all watch your Twitter feeds to see if things start to change over the next few weeks. Who knows?
Well, in the press I can read, does Musk know what waits for him in Europe in this?
Yes.
Yeah. So, concerning Elon Musk, I found a quote in The Guardian a few days after his decision to buy Twitter. Marina Hyde wrote, "I'm not sure what further evidence humanity needs before we cotton on to the idea that social networks might be an intrinsically toxic concept. Of course, there will always be some people who think it just hasn't been done right yet, like communism." So this person thinks that all approaches at regulation will ultimately fail. So the big solution would be to a world without social media, or not privately owned social media not undertaken for profit, but for other reasons. What do you think? Is this true?
Social media without profit?
Well, why not?
Yes, well, this is yes. So, I mean, this is the town square. This is the public assembly. These are the traditional, gathering places of people who share a common interest. Even the Agora. Well, maybe there's some profit in the Agora, but even so, I mean, I think the problem with social media today, it has been so intensely commercialized that our ability to meaningfully communicate online has been increasingly diminished. I don't know that Mr. Musk is going to solve that problem, but we'll see, maybe.
Okay. What do you think, Professor Wertner?
I see it as a public social good. It's a potential public social good, and as such, it shouldn't be governed by private interest. This is a statement you mentioned previously that also the Austrian Federal Chancellor Nehammer realized that we should not privatize all companies because in the situation of a crisis, you need some national interest also in those companies which are essential at the infrastructure. And you can see social media as a means of participation. You can also see them as a means of enforcement, of empowerment. And as such, I think it's a public good. And this issue is of governance. How can you govern it? Maybe they can take some examples from public broadcasting, not the Austrian public broadcasting, but maybe from other countries.
Sir.
You know it. But you see, I would not harm them from the early beginning. And the other thing is, it's driven by commercial interest. It's obvious that you are, let's say, recommending issues where you have high social engagement because you want to increase clicks and things like that. And I think the algorithm should work in a different way. And I think it's an issue of regulation and social public good.
Social media toxic beyond repair?
Well, it's of course a little bit drastic that statement, and of course you can always say, when you see what Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are doing in court, you might say marriage is a toxic concept, No, I'm kidding. So the question is what follows from it. I agree with everything Mark and Hannes were saying. So social networks are the new public space. So we need to think about it as public space, and we need to think what kind of rules did we have for public spaces, and so that's the way we need to approach the topic. On the other hand, to believe, just prohibit all social networks or prohibit any companies engaging in something like a social network, I'm not a big fan of those prohibitions. I think they won't work, and then it may very, very soon kind of end up in another dystopic scenario.
One of the commissioners of the European Union said, in future, what is forbidden offline will be forbidden online. this was the new rule, and this is a step in the right direction probably, because offline a number of things are forbidden that those people in the social medias always said, we have nothing to do with it, yeah? We are not responsible for what people post. I'm not reading it, I don't know it, yeah? And now I think in future they will be held accountable. What they publish has to be moderated, and it has to follow the same rules as in print and television.
I think this is a very populistic statement, because it assumes there's a one-to-one relationship between real world and virtual world, and this is not true.
Yeah.
So you cannot have always the same rules. Okay?
Of course, yeah.
And what is then real and what is virtual? I think you can easily say it, but you have many things. For example, who is the owner? If you have a newspaper, you are responsible. Google says we are not newspaper. So you already have a difference. Who is the gatekeeper? We have gatekeeper roles in the reality, but in the virtual world, you don't have it that clearly defined. So there is no one-to-one relationship between, let's say, the physical, the real, the offline, and the online. And I think you have to look at it at the co-evolution of both of that. Since I see Edward with his word co-evolution, you see both of them, and I think you have a different framing there.
But should politicians be able to define the rules for social media? Or is it a free market, yeah?
No, I think so. I see politicians not that the ugly guys who are, I think them as a democratic representation of our interest, assuming that we have democratic societies. There we have specific rule and it's up to them. I think they should include society in a broader discourse. They should include NGOs and things like that, but I think it's a democratic process. And politicians, for me, are representatives of this democratic process. They have the right and also the obligation to interfere. Yeah. I'm not for the anarchistic free world, a la Thiel and Musk, because then we have a result which I do not really agree with.
I see. So, and now to end the session, I have a very simple question. Let's see if I am able to know.
This is the other way around?
This is the other way around. Let's look. And now. So, this is the easy question at the end. So.
Very easy.
Please.
No, I was hoping to be last. No, has AI improved the human condition? Well, I would say it depends very much on what we're going to do now.
Good.
And so it's the choices we take now that will decide how we will be living in 2030. And let me stress one point. I think it's not just about regulation. I mean, we lawyers tend to see everything through the lens of law and regulation. It's like Mark Twain said, when your only tool is a hammer, then you probably,
treat everything as a nail.
Yeah? Right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at this from a more holistic perspective. And it's certainly not just regulation, it's also the way society develops. Education plays a huge role. Technology, now this is the Vienna University of Technology, so you are playing a really big role. And the economy is going to play a big role in this. So, but yeah, just a short answer, it depends on our choices.
Yes. Yeah, it depends on your choices, yeah. Okay. Professor Rotenberg.
Well, you have both taken the two best answers.
Sorry?
You've taken the two best answers. It depends on our choices. It depends on your choices. It actually does. I mean, we could sit here as experts and, make predictions about medical innovation and make predictions about increasing wealth disparities. I mean, all of these things, could happen. But the wonderful opportunity that open participatory political systems provide is to help shape the future. And you all have to ultimately decide, what role you want AI to play, where you see the benefits and where you see the risks, and how you approach the future in the spirit of actually helping to shape it. So I'm a very deep believer that if anyone tells me something is necessarily going to happen, there's a lot of that talk, by the way, in the AI world. A lot of, we call this technological determinism, which often assumes an answer because you're being told something will happen. No, you decide.
Okay.
It's not only about AI, it's about software in general. I think it's about the computer science and informatics. So I think we were talking about AI, but in essence we were talking about complex software systems with some complexity. And I think, similar to you both, I think we need to combine social innovation with technical innovation. I think we should take the chance that technical innovation can drive social innovation, and if we succeed with that, this is, by the way, the main statement of digital humanism, combine technical with social innovation for the better society, then we will be better off.
Okay. So, does anyone want to add to what has been said so far? Any questions, statements? You. Let me bring you a microphone. Oh,
first, a quick question from the internet.
Okay.
First, a statement regarding getting information from the ministry. One user pointed out that till the 9th of May, there's the possibility for Austrian citizens to sign the petition for anti-corruption and freedom of information law. So everybody here should be like signing it. Can be done digital. And the second question was like from Günther Koch. I think he's the former CEO of the AIT. He asked why is the discussion not happening already like in the last decades.
Okay. So, it's you again. Ja, Volksbegehren unterschreiben. Who hasn't? Antikorruptionsvolksbegehren. Schon gemacht? Ja?
Hello. Okay, so first of all, thank you for this panel. I found it very interesting, and like it left me with a lot of questions that I have to kind of process. So it's always a good thing when this happens. And two questions that might connect actually touch some points that we discussed at the end and then at the beginning, so I'll go a bit backwards. So one of the last things we discussed is about social media, and this discussion about making it public has been around for a while, and actually many other people that research on that actually proposed that we might want to instead make it more private as something that you pay to use because of questions on how this can permit to have better privacy and not have this kind of consumer and producer of information and at the end of value for the social network. This is also all this matter of data used as selling data. No? And so thinking about business processes, it is connecting to something we have seen in the beginning, starting with explanation. So how explanation is just a small part in AI, and it doesn't give us a whole understanding of the whole process. I was wondering what we can do technologically as TUWien or in general as engineers in the process. Professor Rotenberg was mentioning that when we import some products, for example, we have this CE mark in the European Union that tells us that product is safe and it's good and we can use it. And this, from my very high-level understanding, that means that there's been a check on the whole process that allow us to understand that the procedure and the pipeline has been portrayed in a certain way, and there's certain checks and auditing and verification has been made throughout the whole process. And my question is, can we think about something that allow us to have accountability in the process of software in general, of software production?
Okay,
and, yeah.
Good. Yeah, can we?
I feel like turning to one of the students who are here today because we discussed Article 17 in the EU AI Act. That's the conformity assessment, right? Which ends with the award of the CE seal, so that users of the service will be assured that there's been an adequate assessment, impact assessment, actually of the product. And I think it's a good approach. I mean, I ultimately believe that regulation does support innovation because, particularly for consumers, it establishes trust and confidence in products. And there are a lot of things in our world we don't even think about: the kitchen appliance, the toaster, you know, the car, the bicycle, which all work surprisingly well, but it wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
I mean, the accidents and the fires and the damages that came about in the early days of kitchen appliances were quite remarkable, actually. So today you have, frankly, the confidence and the luxury of buying a product and knowing it will do what it's supposed to do, but we don't have that for AI systems.
Yeah.
We just don't.
But should we have it for AI systems? We should.
Yes. Yeah. I think you should have it. We don't have it on software products.
Yeah.
They are not tested. We are not allowed to bicycle without any trust.
It's like
mark.
buying a used car, as seen and driven, yeah. Even Microsoft Excel doesn't say that it's calculating it correctly, yeah.
So they have a lot of, let's say, bypassing of that.
Yeah.
And if you buy a car, it's trusted. It should be. If you buy even the clothes, you have some check on that. On software?
Okay. Yeah, nothing. Questions? Yeah, who? Too many hands up, I can't distinguish now. Nobody? Good.
Coffee.
Yes, snacks and coffee and cold
Also,
beverages.
thanks from my side for this very nice discussion. I don't want to end too pessimistic, but I want to challenge what Marc called the best two answers to this question here. This would imply that we have a choice. Do we have a choice, or are there forces in the market, in the economy, in the human psychology that would determine what will happen in the year 2030 without, and we just feel we have a choice?
I'm going to turn here to a little French philosophy, and this is Pascal's wager on the existence of God. And he essentially said, you know, we should assume this because the alternative is a little too terrifying to imagine. And that's actually my view about solving the challenge of AI. I think we need to assume that we can do this because the alternative is a little too terrifying to imagine.
If there would be a determinism, it would be exactly defined today by all parameters what would be there in 10 years. Okay? If you don't have a human choice, you have a deterministic model of the world with all the processes. And I do not agree with that. It's shown that this is not the case. So I think even from this perspective, we have the chance to interfere, and we should interfere.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's of course a philosophical question you're raising, and probably we're not here now to solve the general philosophical question, but I think there's just no alternative to acting now and to do what we believe is the right thing. We just shouldn't be naive about, thinking that it's going to be easy. And in particular, I'm going to repeat myself, we shouldn't believe we just pass some regulation and it's going to be fine. And this is what I see at the moment around me. We believe, you just have some rules and you pass an act and everything is fine, and that's not really the case. Then the work starts.
I would also have a counterexample, because I think it's also about the primacy. The argument you bring is it's the primacy of the free market, okay? The free market rules. But if you look, let's say, at the pandemic, also you look at the Ukraine war, you see that the politics has taken back primacy. We are now following political rules, it's defined by politicians, and it's not the market. So there is a chance to interfere with history, and as I said previously, we should take this chance.
Good. So I wanted to stop the evening, to end the evening on a friendly note. I saw a video today on Arte. You know Arte? Okay. And sorry?
There would be one more question
Yes,
from
please.
the internet, and the user Cozy Doomer wants to know how do the medical regulations FDR, MDR compare to the GDPR regarding algorithm transparency and data protection?
We didn't really understand
A medical
it.
regulation from FDA, and the other one he's using MDR compared to the GDPR in connection to algorithm transparency and data protection.
That's too many acronyms even for me. I think that question was from an AI that's been following our discussion.
Well,
thank you for that.
Well, it concerns the Food and Drug Administration of the United States. Is it true?
The MDR,
okay.
I don't know.
That's the first abbreviation. I got it. It's the FDR, yeah? And what should it do or not do, has done?
How does it compare to the GDPR?
How do the regulations of the FDR? No, sorry, we can't answer this question. We have to refer you to the internet. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to underscore the point that Hannes raised and suggest that the term algorithmic transparency is actually really destructive. And the reason for that is that knowing the underlying algorithms behind the AIs is, as Hannes pointed out, completely useless. It tells you nothing about how the decisions come about. And it's also, you might say, well, okay, you need the data too. But actually, that's pretty much as useless, okay? In some sense, an AI that's been trained to do a certain decision-making is more like a Kantian thing in itself, das Ding an sich.
This is completely my fault. These are very long paragraphs, and I only quoted one sentence. I don't think that they stopped at looking at the data, but if you want to look at it, it's on the internet. It's the articles 62 to 64 on the European Commission's proposal on a Digital Services Act. There is very much more detail, so please don't blame them. It's my fault. Okay. They know more than looking at the data.
All right.
All right. Good. But anyway, there will be a European process where everyone is invited to comment and to ask and to improve on it. So if this really is a relevant question, the department could approach the Commission. I mean, we are all invited to do so. Yeah. And if this doesn't,
If it doesn't go to the Salzamt afterwards. Sorry. If this doesn't go to the Salzamt afterwards.
Oh,
but
yes,
this was a very cynical comment, sorry for that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I used to be in Parliament, and I think the Romanian Parliament, they started... I used to, yeah. And the Romanian Parliament started to invite all the people in Romania to comment on new laws. And the person responsible for it, I met him in Berlin at the European Conference of Parliamentary IT Specialists. He said, so what do you do with 50,000 recommendations and answers, for a single phrase in a law? Yeah? That's it, yeah. If you have 50,000 answers, it's as good as if you had none of them. So I wanted to end this on a friendly note. Yes. In Arte, I saw today 3 examples where AI helps in medicines a lot. And the example that was most impressive for me was, there was a person who had a stroke, and he couldn't move his left arm and the fingers of his left hand. And with the help of some AI program, a artificial hand that was glued to his fingers moved as he wished by thinking. And this program was an AI program. No one sat 3 years and programmed it. It was just given the basic principles of it. And the program took waves, brain waves, and associated them with his wish to move his fingers. And you could see that with this hand, with this stiff hand, he could grab a glass without breaking it. Yeah? And this was one question of AI. And the other one was, in a hospital, they said a liver transplant. So there was a mother and a son. And the mother's liver was bad, and the son said, yes, you can have half my liver. Yeah? And I learned in that TV program that it took many hours to decide for a physician with his eyes and his knowledge how much of the son's liver could he take without, yeah? Was heißt gefährden auf Englisch? Sorry? Without endangering the son. And he said it would take 1.5 or 2 hours for him as a trained physician to decide that. But the AI that they had decided it in seconds. And he said he decided it better than he could ever have done it. Yeah? But these are the examples where AI doesn't do any harm. Oh? That's pure AI, good AI. So, snacks, food, and of course, you may still talk to the professors.